am starting to learn more about food system and its relationship to education as far as like what our kids are eating and also what they're learning about in the school. But yeah. I mean, should everyone have a backyard farm? I don't know.
This is Serious Grower Podcast. I'm Anna. I'm an entomologist. I'm a scientist, and I'm using this podcast to talk to all kinds of growers and eaters who are serious about their farms, their gardens, their local food systems. And I'm asking, how can science help? Today's co-host is Susan. She is a professor of agriculture at the University of New Hampshire. She brings a ton of commercial experience to her college classroom, but she also brings her expertise to the on-campus community, running a community garden, and is involved with her local daycare.
I guess I think a lot less about the science of farming and more about like the social interaction of farming or the economics of it, things that trend in social media and stuff like that, like having your own backyard garden and like what is the economics of that and like the impact of like these nurseries growing these single broccoli plants and you plant that broccoli and then you harvest it versus you just like spending that money on your local grower who's like doing it on a small but larger scale than your backyard. These are things that I think about a lot. It feels ridiculous to spend $200 to set up like your little backyard garden that you get like 5 things from. Whereas if you spend $200 at like the farm down the road, like that feels like a better use of money. But that's like a personal opinion. I mean,
you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
This is the embarrassing thing is that like I am making a podcast in like the growing world. I don't listen to growing podcasts. This is the first time I've ever like paid any attention to Instagram gurus and like been exposed to it. And I feel like you maybe know a little bit more about that because you've been paying attention to the social media aspect.
I don't really pay attention to it. Like when I first started farming, I am very much like a consume a lot when I get really interested in something. So I feel like in my first like 5 years of farming and the people I was working with are also very much like want to learn everything that there possibly be about garden farming. 1 or 2 podcasts that I listened to like religiously. But then after that, I kind of fell off on it. It was kind of felt like preaching to the choir a lot of it. Like I'm not really learning anything. So I'm kind of getting bored.
I felt about it. It's like it's not novel to me. Every once in a while, you run across somebody who's really good, like the one that you talked about with the rodents. And there was a lady who like her approach to her problems was like so cool and so like a mix of intuitive and scientific approach where like you do get tapped in, but it's almost always based on like, I have a problem I need fixed. This person's a solution for me.
Yeah.
Maybe we could find like social media trends and kind of pick them apart. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably there's people at UNH who would know so much more about this, which maybe would be good to interview about. But even just like I'm starting to learn more about food system and its relationship to education as far as like what our kids are eating and also what they're learning about in the schools. And that's mostly because I have kids in school systems. But I'm also on an early childhood education farm to school. I'm trying to like set my own preconceived notions of like how people should interact with farming aside, because at this point in my career, I just know almost too much about farming to like, I'm a farmer who has grown seedlings for sale. So like, I get it. Like that is also income for farm. How can you have your at-home experience in the most locally impactful way? In my head, it was growing a few tomato plants, right? Tomato plants for children, it's so attainable. Like, a lot of kids don't really like tomatoes, but if they grow it themselves and they pick it themselves, they're much more likely to try it multiple times and eventually like it. That's, I feel like, a good way of, you buy a local seedling at a farm that like uses seedling income to jumpstart in the spring. I don't know, like big box stores and like buying a bunch of containers and then like their plants die halfway through the year. It's like the sustainability of that feels like questionable.
That, and you also think about variety selection, right? So like are people who are growing transplants for sale in the spring, are they picking the same varieties that they're growing on their farm, or are they picking varieties that are like cherry tomatoes that are really sweet, that are the like JV level growing experiences for their clients? Then they have to have space for both their transplants and the transplants they're growing to the public.
I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going. This could probably be a whole podcast episode about early childhood education. Like the best way to expose kids to vegetables or like to gardening and farming is like to have a garden at the school. Cool, but also like, who is maintaining it? are you growing in a way that, I don't want to say the right way, but like in a educational, informational way? Because a lot of times it's like people don't have the training in it.
Also, I have a really positive experience with growing vegetables because I did it with my dad. And I have a lot of very warm, fuzzy feelings about vegetables because that relationship is so nice and so positive. It was in my backyard. It was something I did with my dad.
Right.
Who knows what that kid will say if it's just a garden in their backyard? Like, do they have positive feelings about that environment? Is it necessarily going to be a positive thing? Because if it is a positive thing, spending $200 for a head of broccoli all of a sudden makes sense.
Yeah. These are the things that I'm trying to kind of grapple with in the professional sense of it doesn't always have to be done right for it to be impactful for a child. I don't know all the psychology of children, and I deal with my own personal issues with like having my kids eat vegetables and like have a good relationship with food. It's a huge demographic. These are the like future farmers, the future eaters, the future economic stimulators of our communities. And I don't know, the interaction of gardening versus farming is very different for me. And I don't know, it's kind of like a rabbit hole of conversation. But
I love it. This is like, there's so many aspects of non-commercial farming where like, how do you measure value?
right. Yeah, I run a community garden. I know, I've seen the impact, and yet I'm still like, okay, but like the economics of it, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, should everyone have a backyard farm? I don't know. I think so.
All right, so the next time I met with Susan, I sprung a little surprise on my unsuspecting co-host with another mom friend of hers. Morgan is a mom who I met recently, filling in for her as a temp while she was busy away, adding to her family. I did her job. I worked in her office, and it was a little bit of a Winnie the Pooh situation. Do you remember how he lived in a tree under the name Mr. Sanders? I thought about that pretty much every time I saw her name on my office door. But small worlds will have a way of colliding, and these two happen to be mom friends. In addition to doing a little bit of homework on the topics that we were talking about, I was kind of reflecting on how much harder it seems to be a parent now. I'm not a parent, but looking at how folks have it now compared to how it was when I was growing up. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I had a pretty amazing childhood. I felt like I got a ton of enriching opportunities and was always up to something cool. I think my parents were also very good role models. They had friends, they had social lives, they were active in the community, and I saw that and I value that. So we're all products of our local community. But now we have the internet, and there's a million different communities to be a part of. There's a million different ways to be a parent. There's a million different ways you can be doing things right or wrong, and it's really overwhelming. So I was really pleased to talk to a couple of mom friends about how gardening fits into making an amazing childhood for their family. So I did do a little bit of homework. I was reading about the vast amount of literature when it talks about the benefits of doing either gardening programs in school or gardening programs that get people to grow vegetables at home. But before I get into that, do you want to talk about what you are doing, either your home or Morgan? I know you were talking a little bit about doing some container gardening. I don't know if that's in your future right now. Like, what are you doing at home?
That's actually the thing I wrote down that I wanted to talk about, because I've been bugging Susan since I figured out what she did about doing workshops for parents or just including kids. Because I feel like last summer and I were working on gardening and we were learning alongside each other. I didn't know what I was doing, so I figured let's get her involved because she showed an interest from school. They have the community garden at school. So we started doing container gardening, I guess. I wrote pots. I didn't know what it's called, container gardening. We started doing that last summer and it went. We got some vegetables. I mean, we started with a bajillion seeds and little seedlings, and we had to weed them out because I didn't realize how many would actually take off. That felt sacrilegious to just like toss them into the woods because I didn't know what to do with them. But we did end up getting some like cucumbers and tomatoes. But it was just, I had so many questions. I wish I had a lifeline. I wish I had somebody that I could have texted and said, hey, what am I doing wrong? Like, what's going on with this plant? You know, I have no clue. So we were learning alongside each other. We just went to the store and bought the little packets, which was funny in itself because I didn't realize we got to the checkout and then there were ones in the cart. Like, she got jalapenos. I'm not a jalapeno. I mean, they're great, but I never would have picked them out. But they took off really well too. And she ended up picking them right off the vine and eating them. But I was so nervous. She loved it. Bold move.
Yeah, Susan, what do you think? Like, should Morgan have been texting you and asking about how to... So here's something that I thought was really funny is that Susan and I were talking about this a couple weeks ago, and she mentioned tomato being really easy to grow. And I disagree. I think tomato is not easy to grow at all. And Susan just knows how to grow things. It comes naturally to her. And I think tomato is a varsity level vegetable. Susan, do you want to disagree with me or agree with me?
Mm. I guess I say it's easy to grow in the fact that like it grows vigorously, but I would agree that it is a varsity level because to get a good crop out of it, like a healthy, robust fruit crop out of it, yeah, there are like techniques you need to learn or skills you need to learn. However, I feel like it's a really good teaching tool because like if you grow lettuce, for example, right, you're putting that right into a pot and then you plant it and you water it and then you get lettuce. You can pick it when it's little, you can pick it when it's big. And like, that's kind of the extent of it. Whereas tomatoes, there's, now that I think about it, like the way I would teach a student how to grow it, there are several steps. However, those several steps teach you how to garden. It's going to teach you how to start a seedling, how to transplant it, or how to pot it up, how to put it in the ground, how to make sure its nutrient levels are good, how to look for pests, how to trellis, how to prune. And I feel like those are all the basic skills of successful gardening. Like lettuce to me is more of like a kid level success of gardening. Like you take a seed, you learn what a seed is, you put a seed in the ground, you water it and it grows. And like that's the extent of the learning process where adults can take it further than that. We can work with the plant as it gets bigger. Yeah. So I agree and disagree.
Had people a note to start with lettuce, by the way. Thank you for that. One thing that I noticed at the CSDC during their harvest festival, they had the beans in the cup. Well, they would just give the kids a cup of dirt and a bean, like a seed. And that's what they would encourage them to grow. So would that be a beginner friendly?
I think so.
Yeah.
And that might be a nice step between lettuce and tomato. Like fewer things go wrong.
Like a hierarchy of what's the easiest one to grow.
I would say for the age of our children, like in the 3 to 5 age range, like you want to plant with seeds that their hands can handle. That's why beans and sunflowers and even like cucumbers and squash, like those are the things that the kids are going to be planting because the seeds they're large enough to handle where if you drop it, you can find it. If you're looking at lettuce seed, which is very, very tiny, right? Little tiny hands, they don't have the dexterity to plant something like lettuce, where it's like one bean in one hole. That's like, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. It's pretty easy. Yeah, I think that's probably why like beans. Also beans, like you can see the whole process of a seed sending out its taproot and then going to the first cotyledon. It's very visually pleasing for a child to see the whole process. Sometimes they'll plant beans in a clear container so you can see the whole germination process. It's a good teaching tool versus something that's small seeded and you're not going to really see the process at all.
For the cucumbers, we put them in the wet paper towel and stuck them in a Ziploc bag. And then we taped them up to our slider windows in the sun so they could watch the little sprouts start.
That's cool. I would never do that. But that's me being a farmer or like childhood education gardener.
What? That is such a good example of something that you would do because you can see the roots and it's an educational thing. And then somebody who does that goes, oh, you're supposed to do that to seeds, but that's not how seeds work. You're supposed to put them in the dark, really.
Yeah.
So like that interplay. But the thing is like the reason you did it was so that your kids could see the roots.
No, Anna, the reason I did it is because I didn't know what I was doing. And I thought that would work.
It did what it was supposed to do. It made roots.
It did.
All it needed was water.
We got cucumbers by the end of the season, so.
There's more than one way to do everything with farming and gardening. And I think that's like also a great demonstration of that.
I think you naturally pick some moderately challenging but appropriate ones. Like pepper is super, super easy. Leafy greens are the easiest, but they're probably not the sexiest, right? They're probably not as sweet. They're probably not as exciting. Which kind of leads into my review of the literature, which is not from the point of view of an expert. We tried to get some experts involved, but they're too busy teaching school right now. Did find a source. Cornell has this big list of like everything together, of all of the potential benefits. They looked at things as nutritional awareness, which is like just having kids have a better relationship with fruits and vegetables. Environmental awareness, so like having the experience of gardening, making them care about the environment. That's another thing. Learning achievements, which is basically saying having gardening in the classroom, does it make kids more excited and do better in school writ large? And there's life skills, which I think is more interesting to Susan, like teaching kids how to actually grow things that they can take and do the rest of their life. Health and wellness, there's definitely like a nutritional aspect of that, but there's this like whole like touching dirt and being outside, and that's a little bit squishier. And then there's a bunch of programs that do a lot to build community and social connection. So if you think about community garden and sharing and like having positive outcomes, I thought it would be the most interesting for the conversations that Susan and I were having, which is gardening improves opportunity to gain interest in eating more fruits and vegetables. A lot of the papers just looked at how this curriculum that school was deploying, how it changed kids' attitudes. But there was a lot of studies that looked at actual outcomes. Kids who were exposed to growing vegetables, were they more likely to eat vegetables? They were more likely to eat vegetables. They were more willing to taste new things. They were more likely to increase the variety of vegetables they were eating. Something I did notice was that like programs that were focusing more on educational outcomes, there was kind of a mixed result in kids' attitudes towards vegetables. So like just giving them the experience of growing was more impactful than teaching them how to grow, which that's probably not what you wanted to hear, Susan. But Morgan, maybe that's good news for you, because like just having the plants there and having fruits and stuff coming off of them, that's all you need. One of the most interesting ones that I read was a group of parents of 2 to 5-year-olds. They were part of a project that was teaching people how to grow fruits and vegetables at home. There was like a couple thousand people were involved in this project. So they were able to poll a really big group of people. They essentially asked questions like, how often do you have homegrown fruits and vegetables at home? And then a separate question where they asked them, how often do your kids eat vegetables? People who were more likely to have fruits and vegetables at home responded, my kids always eat fruits and vegetables. Like there was a relationship there, which like reading between the lines, it sounds like in those households, it just wasn't a fight to get their kids to try vegetables. So what do you think? What is your response there?
Yes, I think like it's not what I want to hear, only in a professional sense. But as a parent, if I separate myself, like absolutely, like that's what I want to hear. My kids attend schools. There is a garden there. They're actively in the garden. Like the learning of a 2 to 5-year-old is curiosity and hands-on experience. So like, yeah, they're not going to actually know how to start a tomato seed and bring it all the way to harvest, but they can participate in the process. It kind of unearths a sustainability problem I see with these gardening programs, which could be a different conversation, knowing that even having the garden and in whatever state it's in, whatever doesn't truly matter, which is something that I kind of need to learn myself, that just like the exposure to being part of that process and like picking a tomato or a bean or whatever it is right out of the garden, eating it. Yeah. Like, do you think I would have eaten a jalapeno if you served it on a plate before she had ever grown it?
Absolutely not. Oh, and that's why I think working at the CSDC before, I got to see the teachers talk a lot about how just getting that hands-on experience, like you're talking about, just being able to, like even just cutting open the fruits and vegetables and talking about what's inside and just fostering that curiosity about them is huge. That's why I wanted to get her involved with whatever our garden looked like just some semblance of a garden. Because it's almost like, like IKEA furniture. There's like, you put it together yourself and then you have this sense of like, oh, I did it, kind of got this sense of pride. Yeah. That's how she felt about the garden, she was like, oh, we grew that. She was so proud of it. And I think that got her really interested in wanting to try new things. I mean, it didn't always work out. Like she was really excited about her cherry tomatoes. We went inside, even cut them open, got to look at what was inside. And then she just like popped it right in her mouth and spit it right back out and said, I don't like it. Hated it. But she was really excited to try. She had this sense of pride and she was curious. So that's all I wanted to do, because she could be a really picky eater. I wanted her to kind of open her mind too. fruits and veggies that are out there.
Yeah, I would say both my children have like the same exposure to growing, picking, harvesting. Like they come to my farm with me and harvest stuff right off the plants. One is, this morning she chose to eat raw like cucumbers and peppers for breakfast. And then the other one would never do that. It also is really kid dependent. I want to give both my kids a fair chance at like that exposure and that curiosity. And they're both very willing to smell and taste and pick up and all that stuff, but actually like ingest it and choose it as like a meal. They're not the same, but that's okay. Like how many exposures to a food before a child may actually eat it? I forget how many it is. It's like 20 something times or something they need to be exposed to a food for them to actually maybe even consider eating it. That's really hard. That's a hard thing as a parent, especially if you don't like wasting food.
You're not going to change their personalities. It's like that nature versus nurture. Kids are just going to be the way that they are, but at least you gave them the opportunity and that experience.
So fine. I'm going to jump in here because Susan mentioned sustainability, and I think she meant sustainability in two different ways. One is environmental sustainability and the kind of inputs that we use to grow things, which we'll get to later. But the other one, I think, was sustainability from a point of view of keeping the programs going. We all value the garden experiences in early childhood education. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a professor around the corner who is so personally invested in her community and able to, lend some time to making sure that this project has at least some advisory information. So that's where our conversation goes.
I have no idea what you do. It's just mind-blowing to me. It makes no sense. I know we talked briefly ages ago about like a workshop or something for the parents at the CSDC to learn how to garden. So I think it is important to take that skill home. I know that they get to garden at school, but I don't know, for parents to kind of understand it too. I was never taught how to garden. I don't know the beginning of this.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that this year. I would love to like pick your brain at some point of like, what are you wanting to get out of it? Because there's like a million things I could teach you, right? You're not the first adult who has asked me this. Like I've had so many people in adulthood be like, I want to take your class at UNH. I'm like, okay, take my class at UNH. Doesn't really fit into their schedule, but what I'm going to teach you at a college level course is something different than what I would teach parents at a evening gardening workshop.
How did you get into farming?
I'll tell my story, how I tell my students. I grew up in Rhode Island in a very suburban area. Everyone had a backyard and some people had gardens, but we had like a little one, but I wasn't interested. I was a very picky, selective eater. I did not like fruits and vegetables really at all. And most of that I learned as an adult. You can eat a blueberry one day and it tastes one way, and then you eat a blueberry the next day and it tastes different. And I realize now like the struggle I had as a child, and that's like a very normal childhood picky eater thing. So I wasn't really that interested in like fruits and vegetables or growing or farming. I had no experience. In high school, I joined a youth group that focused on a lot of large world issues. And one of those issues was climate change. Your world is expanding as a teenager and you're like, oh my God, there's so many problems in the world. Like, how are we going to solve them all? I really gravitated towards environmental justice. I went to UNH and I studied environmental conservation studies. This is like during the 2008 recession. So we were kind of this rhetoric of like, I don't know what kind of job you're going to be able to get with a degree with that was kind of buzzing around. And as a very practical person, I was like, I need to pick a niche thing within environmental conservation and like focus on that. And I gravitated towards agriculture. I got my first job farming in the summer and I learned that I really loved it. I loved being hands-on. I loved being in the field. I didn't mind being hot and sweaty and dirty and all those things that come with summer farming. So I started taking lots of classes at UNH that were agriculturally based, got some more jobs at farms in the summer. And then after graduation, I started working as an assistant manager on a small vegetable farm, market garden style, which means that we're farming a lot of vegetables on a very small plot of land, huge variety of crops, organic practices, and led me to a few other things in life. But that's where I got the bulk of my experience, where I really learned how to both be a farmer and hone in my farming skills, my manager skills, and then eventually that led me to teaching at UNH.
It doesn't translate that easily to just like backyard, because we don't even have a yard. And here you've seen it's just a concrete wall. It's dismal. So that's why I'm thinking container gardening, but it doesn't translate really, huh?
It does. Like the fundamentals do. It's more for me, I have a harder time with the scale of things.
And also, Susan, you mentioned something to me before. Is you were kind of saying, I know too much. Your mindset, and I think you do have a farmer mindset because farmers think in 4D.
Yes.
Right? So you have space, like you're going to plant this here, it's going to get this size. This is what's going to happen over time, especially if you are part of like an organic practices mindset. You're thinking about that soil in like this 4D sense. Soil is a mineral-based place to grow, where if you're growing in a pot, you're more likely to be 100% organic. The only word I can say is behaves differently than a mineral soil, right?
Yeah.
So it actually is much easier to grow a tomato in the ground than it is to grow it in a pot, ironically. But that might be part of what you're thinking is like, I'm thinking about like, how do I build the soil to get it to produce for me versus how do I get this like domesticated animal to perform for you in a way that we actually don't study that much in agriculture. It's more like hydroponics. It's more like growing in like a plant factory.
Yeah. I think there's actually more that can go wrong for like a tomato plant or a pepper plant, it growing in a pot. Some people are really excellent at it. Yeah, I know too much, but also don't know enough about container growing, I guess is how it is, because like I don't keep house plants. Like people, I think, come to my house thinking they're going to see like a beautiful garden out front and then like all these potted plants in my house. And I have like one jade plant. Every time I try to grow things in a small container, like I somehow mess it up, even though I know the fundamentals of growing plants.
So I'm going to jump in here again because we did talk at length about the difference between growing in mineral soils, dirt in the ground versus container gardening. Our conversation went into how quickly Susan and I started using jargon that a regular civilian wouldn't understand. So I'm jumping in here to fix some of my errors in communication. Container gardening, which Morgan said, it's growing in pots. And it's really attractive because it works in small spaces where you don't have a lawn. It does allow precise control over soil, water, fertility. There's no weed pressure. There's very rarely, weed seeds making their way into these pots because you're starting with really clean growing media. But with that control comes great responsibility. You can optimize light, you can optimize the weather, but you need to know how to do that. So that's the challenge there. Soil-less media potting mix is usually peat moss, which strangely enough is a non-renewable resource with a kind of a high carbon footprint. It's mined, for lack of a better term, out of these peat bogs, mostly in Canada. At a large scale, on an industrial scale, industries that rely on peat moss in container gardening are trying to go away from this. If you look at bedding plants, nursery crops, ornamentals, anything that's grown in a container is going to be looking for a peat alternative. You'll see alternatives like coconut coir. These are coconut husks that are smushed up. Compost from your local farms. These are all things that are replacing peat. For a farmer or somebody who's working at an industrial scale, they don't perform in the same way. And when you're really trying to hone in on exactly the right nutritional strategy, switching from peat to coir is a problem. If you are growing one pot of cucumbers or tomatoes, is not an issue at all. Another point in sustainability might be plastic containers. Again, at an industry size scale, plastic is a big problem. It's a challenge. But in a home situation, use a plastic container. It's so much easier to maintain soil moisture. That's the name of the game. If you want to stay away from plastic, you can certainly use terracotta. You can use fabric growing bags. They all have slightly different watering strategies. Speaking of watering strategies, it is very important that your containers have holes in the bottom of them and something to catch water at the bottom of it. If you have no holes, water will sit in the bottom and the plant roots don't like that. I will not dive into nutrition here because when you go online, there'll be all sorts of recommendations about how to go about this, what to look for if it's not going well. But it's also relative depending on what you're growing. We discussed that.
Here's the thing. I would love to create like a course or like a workshop series. I don't really know where to start with that kind of stuff. So Morgan, maybe we could work together on that as someone who can ask the questions that help me formulate how to teach it, because I obviously know the concepts and like what to do. It's just, what are the questions that a parent with a young child who wants to garden in their backyard, what are they feeling like they don't know? I constantly have people who are like, my plants turned yellow and then they died. I water it every day and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but did you give it any nutrients? Like, what are you doing for food for those plants? And they're like, nothing. Okay, start there.
And going back to the theme of knowing too much is that most of the resources online assume a level of knowledge that's inappropriate. I was going to have a recommendation for extending early childhood education about gardening to adults. It would be more like a coaching session. It would probably not have any educational goals. Right? It would be more like, you have to feed your plants. Here's a few things you could do. Let's talk in a month what happened. And it might, who knows what it would be like. It would turn into like a bitch fest about like, oh, my kid's not into it. Well, try again. And if not, then give it up. It's okay. Like, no one's going to be mad at you. No one's going to judge you. Or it could be like, oh, yeah, like maybe you over fertilized. I think the coaching aspect takes care of that. Like, you don't know where people are starting from.
I think you're right. Like, you get into the internet and you think, hey, I can do this. I don't know if either of you use TikTok, but it is good. Don't. You watch a video and I don't know how to do it because it's just little bite size. They make it look so easy, but there's so much that you don't know that you don't know that you don't know. So you go into it and then all of a sudden, like you said, like everything's turning yellow. And why I did the thing, I bought the thing that they said with the, what is it? Worm meal, something. I don't remember. It can go wrong in so many different ways. And it's just so specific to that person in that situation, in that environment. That you almost do need like a coaching, like, this is what I'm trying to do. These are my goals. How? I don't even know where to start.
Well, I'm going to leave it there for now, but it sounds like I've got myself a new co-host. Maybe Morgan wants to come over and do some coaching and you can listen into that conversation. But you will certainly be hearing more from Susan and I on this topic of early childhood education and gardening, particularly since Susan's colleagues at UNH actually study this stuff. We will find out more about the scientific methods deployed when assessing attitude amongst young children. I guarantee you it's just as adorable as you might imagine it. Find photos of what we discussed on our Instagram at Serious Grower. Serious Grower Podcast is a production of New Hampshire community-supported research. If you're interested in becoming a co-host, or are interested in gardening coaching, or would like to learn more about our mission to democratize agricultural research, visit our website at nhcsr.org or come over to our YouTube channel at NHCSR, where we're sharing insights from the agricultural research community and vlogging about our research efforts on the farm. You can support this work by liking and subscribing, or even better, consider joining our Patreon community.